The Peter Pan factor is another commonality we see in these three men. Remember the story of Peter Pan? He is the boy that cannot grow up and is actually trapped in a fantasy realm. The story of Peter Pan is first seen in a story called The Little White Bird. He can fly at first, but is then trapped in the park at Kensington Gardens, which is basically a portal to Never Never Land. It is a very curious story that is largely based off of J.M. Barrie and his relationship with the Llewyn Davies brothers.
I've always thought that he had some curtain that he could pull down over his mind and just refuse to see or know what people thought or what happened. For instance, on the subject of sex, I really had to tell him more than he ever told me. I remember having lunch with him after I was married, and he was in the middle of some book where she said, I've just come across a passage here in Nico which I don't quite understand. It says somebody who he has married, as the person in the book has married, was shop-soiled. What does shop-soiled mean? So I said, well, Uncle Jim, I think it probably means that she'd been to bed with one or two other people before she married this man. And the look of such horror came over Uncle Jim's face, which I shall never forget as long as I live. And my opinion is, of course, he must have known such things happened, but in some way he pulled a curtain down over his eyes or over his mind and shut himself away from these things. I think he closed his eyes to what people could have thought about him and my mother, or what he himself could have thought about Gilbert Cannon and his wife Mary. It's very difficult to describe it. My chief word about him, I think he was an innocent.
In her will, their mother, Sylvia Llewyn Davies, left custody of the boys to Barrie. From a Reddit thread about Barrie, Barrie dabbled in photography and took photos of the boys playing, including a few in which they were playing in the water nude. 2 such photos were published, 2 copies made. In The Boy Castaways of Black Lake Island, the others were kept along with other snapshots of the boys. Nude bathing was commonplace for young boys in that society at the time, especially in secluded areas such as where these were taken, and such scenes were not perceived as sexual. He initially entertained them with his playful antics such as dancing with his St. Bernard, Porthos, wiggling his ears and performing feats with his eyebrows, and further endeared himself to them with his imaginative short stories. He became a regular part of their lives, whom they came to call Uncle Jim. And I would say that it is kind of strange when we consider grown men who prefer the company of children. And that's all I'll say on the speculation here. And it's not proven that Barrie was abusing children, but his stories about them are indeed strange. Peter Pan is meant to be able to fly, but in his initial appearance he seems cursed by a mysterious man in the park named Solomon. The Little White Bird has autobiographical undertones, and this is from the same Reddit post. Barrie met the Llewyn Davies boys in Kensington Gardens. In the book, a bachelor, the protagonist, befriends a boy called David, and they have adventures together around London and Kensington Gardens. The man's main concern is that one day the boy will grow up and leave him alone. This feeling inspired Barrie to write about a boy who doesn't grow up. The book begins with the narrator talking about how much he wishes he were Davy's father, and how he pretends to be his own dad in random situations, such as in a shop or a cafe. The narrator explains the facts of life by saying children start out as birds in Kensington Gardens before losing their wings and turning into human children. In this story, we can see Barrie not wanting the children to grow up and leave him. He writes an elaborate fantasy that boys get trapped in the park and then get banished to Never Never Land, a purgatory where they can never grow up. I find this to be very creepy. Of course, I found this in the Reddit of Leaving Neverland HBO. Michael Jackson is a great example of the Peter Pan factor. He grew up and surrounded himself with children whom he could control and abuse. Again, this may be an extension of abuse that Jackson likely endured. Abuse is a cyclical problem. Basically, this is the arrested development that we can observe in many celebrities and their fans. The fan is in a parasocial or one-sided relationship with the celebrity. The celebrity is also surrounded by sycophants that cannot and dare not say no. Depp and Manson both received high amounts of attention by the time they were in their mid-20s. Same with Miller. They haven't had to grow up since. I'm often reminded of that quote in Dazed and Confused when Matthew McConaughey is leaning up against a wall.
So you're a freshman, right?
Yeah.
Well, so tell me, man, how's this year's crop of freshman chicks looking?
What, you're gonna end up in jail sometime really soon, I know that. Fact.
No, man.
Yeah.
No, man, I tell you.
Yeah.
That's what I love about these high school girls, man. I get older, they stay the same age.
Because of their status, these men can constantly trade in for younger and younger women. They are catered to by everyone around them. Their experience of reality is warped to center completely around their status and fame. They can stay in Never Never Land forever, surrounding themselves with those that they have more power over, whether it be who they employ or who they date. The power imbalance isn't always about age, but it often is. Next, we'll talk about Johnny Depp, and we'll return to the thematic element that unites these three men, which I find to be a practice of the dark arts. It was interesting exploring J.M. Barrie in that story, The Little White Bird, basically illustrating this desire to keep these boys trapped in a fantasy of the author's will, in his creation there, in his story. And I think, these men don't have to grow up. They don't have to face the reality that most of us do. So until next time, be well, God bless, and I hope you have an awesome time doing whatever you're doing.